We have fought many wars, but today our freedom is restricted. The world is living of fear due to a virus. So today we are talking about COVID-19. And I have invited a dear good friend of mine on the show today, Professor Raghulan Rajalingam, a senior consultant pulmonologist from Apollo Hospital, Chennai. And Raghulan is a long-lasting friend who have been with me starting from medical college in Sri Ramachandra Medical College. In second year and the final year, he have taught me so many um, exams and lectures, plus during the exam time especially, he have been a true help. I remember we used to study pathology in second year and final year medicine together. He was a super senior, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with you, Professor. And I'm very proud of you, about you, of your all the achievements that you have achieved as a young doctor, young consultant, and young professor. Professor, how are you doing today?
Yeah. Good evening. Thank
Good evening.
you, Dr. Kavinda, for your kind and very brief introduction. I'm doing good, and I would like to add a note for on your father. I would be really thankful for your father. He is a great man, and the world really misses him during this type of pandemic situation. Especially our country needs a young, dynamic leader like him. So regarding this pandemic situation, it is like which is out of our hands. We need some certain really true leaders to take the situation in their own hand and try to control it and help the country and the public and the economy to survive more.
Professor, today I'm going to keep this conversation in terms of a layman because I want listeners and guests to understand most of the things that what we are discussing today, because it's a very serious conversation that we are having, Professor, at this time of the year. Yes, you're right. Now we are at the middle of a pandemic, and I would like to know. People have heard of fungus, people have heard of viruses, people have heard of bacteria, and people are curious about COVID-19. What is COVID-19 and what is a virus?
Okay. So before getting into virus, I will tell the small introduction. So we have the infection into three forms. That is, one is bacteria, one is virus, and the third one will be fungus. So all are pathogen. Pathogens are the ones which cause the disease. So the basic difference between a virus and a bacteria is bacteria is basically a living organism. It self reproduces itself, whereas a virus needs a host to survive, whereas a bacteria doesn't need a host to survive. So if a virus without a host is either can be any living organism, it either can be an animal or it can be a human. It needs a host to survive, to multiply and to replicate. So most viruses need a host. So without a host, a virus won't survive. Whereas the bacteria is actually a living organism, whereas it doesn't need a much of a host to reproduce it themselves. So this is the basic difference between a virus and a bacteria. And a virus, usually the virus disease won't last for a very long time, but it will be a severe for a very short time. Whereas a bacteria needs a long time for the treatment, but usually the bacterial disease also is a threatening disease like a virus disease.
And Professor, now this new type of virus that what we are experiencing today started in 2019 end from Wuhan. And
Yes.
most of the people started talking about this virus. But I'm
Yes.
sure that the doctors and the clinicians have identified this virus long before. So
Yes.
if you can go back to the history
Yes.
about this virus and
Yes.
discuss about it, I think that will
Okay.
be very important.
Yeah. Yeah. Coronavirus is a huge family of viruses. It has been stated it been identified in 1940s and 1960s. So what we are facing now is called SARS-CoV-2. It's the virus, and COVID-19 is the disease caused by that virus. So this coronavirus is basically from animal. So we are having the third uh, SARS-CoV. That is, first was there in 2002 from China. So the virus was identified in bats. From bats, it has been transmitted to civet cats, and the humans consumed civet cats. So in 2002, the first SARS-CoV-1 has been reported. SARS stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. So in 2012, the same virus has come from Middle East. So from bats, it went to camels. The human consumed camels. So the virus came in Middle East in 2012. Middle East respiratory syndrome. That is called MERS. So that is the second time we faced that virus. The third virus, what we are facing right now is 2019 virus. It's called SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-1 came in 2002. SARS-CoV-2 has come in 2019. So that virus identified from bats to intermediate course that is supposed to be pangolin, like an anteater, which we are not sure about still. From anteater, it has been transmitted to human. So what we are dealing right now is SARS-CoV-2, that's the virus. And the disease caused by SARS-CoV-2 is called COVID-19. COVID-19 because 2019, late November, the disease has been identified.
So, Professor, starting from SARS goes to MERS, then SARS-CoV-2. Now we are at this junction where we are aware that this is a respiratory disease. So, I would like to know, how does this virus spread, Professor?
Okay. The virus usually spread through droplet infections. If an infected person sneezes, cough, or even if the person is infected, very severe infections, having a very severe infection, there is a talk saying that whenever the patient talks, he may even spread the virus. So when the virus is in the air, or when the infected patient is using the touched surfaces or contacting through the other person, that person may inhale the virus. Once the virus enters your body, is usually through the nasal route, usually the inhalation route, or through the contact route. The contact route is less, but the inhalation route is more. So when it enters to the nasal passage, the virus attaches itself to the epithelial cells. We call it some small cells which are lining in the nose and in the throat and in the lung. So the virus gets attached to the epithelial cells. How it is getting attached is the structure is made up of spikes. That is why it's called corona. The spikes get attached into the epithelial cells. That is the cell lining of the nose, throat, and the lung. Through that, it travels through the body.
So, Professor, now we have the upper lobe of the lung, then the middle lobe, and the lower lobe. So, where does it get affected the most, and where does the fibrosis happens, Professor?
Okay. So, once the patient inhales the pathogen, that is the virus gets attached to the epithelial cells, and as it travels down, that is from the nose, it goes to the throat, and from the throat, it goes to the lung. So they have high affinity for the epithelial cells, especially the respiratory epithelial cells. So when it getting inside the lung, wherever the virus goes, there is some inflammatory reaction take place. That is, whatever your body is lying will go for an inflammation. So when there is an inflammation, there is some mechanism happening around your area, whichever the virus has been infected, and that area doesn't take part in their particular function. For example, in a respiratory, in your lung is lined by some tubes. We call it as the respiratory tubes. We even furthermore call it as bronchus and respiratory bronchi, something like that. So when the virus is entered through those bronchi or the tubes, those particular bronchi and the tubes will inflame. Means that part of the bronchi or the tube doesn't take part in their function. So the main function of those lung is gas exchange. So when the gas exchange is not happening, these they'll have started showing the symptoms. So because of the inflammation, every symptoms develops, and once the inflammation is settles down, there's no need to bother. But the inflammation is progressing, that is going into for a scarring. Basically, scarring in the sense the tubes gets hard and produces a scar. That is, we call it as a fibrosis. That will be the end stage of the resolving disease. If still the inflammation is not going down, it will go for something we call it as acute respiratory syndrome, where the air exchange doesn't take place in the end of your lungs, where patient goes for uh, the most severe form of the disease and the patient dies.
Yeah, Professor, most of the bacteria, viruses have a incubation period.
Yes.
So does this virus also has an incubation period, Professor?
Yes, incubation period, all the disease has an incubation period. Incubation period means the time taken from the patient who has been infected and the time taken for him to show the symptoms. So ideally, the SARS-CoV-2, the incubation starts from 5th day or 6th day. Even now, the later cases, we are seeing it on 4th day, and it lasts for 14 days. So from the day of infection, around 14 days, we keep that as an incubation period.
And now once you very clearly, methodically mention how this virus is getting into our system and how is it spreading around. We would like to know what is the signs and symptoms of a patient who have got this virus, Professor.
Okay. So usually this is basically a virus. So virus are have a very certain peculiar symptoms. It starts, the patient is inhaling through the nose. So we will start from the nose. So from the nose, the patient might have nose block, running nose, or sometimes headache. Then it goes after the nose, it goes to an area called sinus, where he may have a headache. From the sinus, the virus enters the throat. So there is a chance the patient will have sore throat, that is throat pain, or sometimes there is a itching in the throat. So virus is in the throat. Once the virus is getting down, so the patient will have, when the virus is getting down to the respiratory tract, the patient will develop cough, and the virus is furthermore going down, the patient will have difficulty in breathing. So this is the classical symptoms for a SARS-CoV-2. But the second wave, what we are facing here right now is the recent symptoms are a bit tricky. Most common presentation now is they don't have any smell. They can't able to appreciate smell. They can't able to appreciate taste, and they may have red eye. One or two, both eyes or one eye will have conjunctivitis. That is, we call it as a medical term. They will have red eye, and few cases we have seen has been reported to have diarrhea. No other symptoms, but only diarrhea. Diarrhea for 3 to 4 days time. We take RT-PCR. They turn out to be COVID positive. One of few off-book symptoms are joint pain and back pain, classical for the second, the mutated virus strain.
And Professor, what we are seeing on news and
Yes.
media, what's happening back in India,
Yes.
They say some of the patients who have got COVID-19 eventually end up with black fungus. So,
Yes.
what is this black fungus? Swollen eyes, congested nose. What is this?
Okay. So black fungus is basically fungus disease. It's like I said in the starting of the talk, we have three types of disease infections. One will be bacteria, virus, and fungus. Fungus is usually not applicable for all persons. Means not all people will get fungus disease. Fungus disease is usually when a patient is immunocompromised. Immunocompromised in the sense the patient's immunity level is very, very less. So when a patient is having a SARS-CoV-2 disease, his immune system is impacted. In addition to that, if the patient has a diabetic mellitus, or the patient is having other status like HIV, or patient is on chronic kidney disease, or patient is on long-term disease modifying drugs like steroids for rheumatoid arthritis or some other problem which impacts your immune system are highly prone for fungal diseases. It can be any fungal diseases. But in particularly this black fungus is, we call it as mucormycosis. It is classical for immunocompromised state patients. We are not seeing in all patients. We only see in patients where their immunity level is really, really down. So SARS-CoV patient with diabetes mellitus already having other comorbidities, like either the patient is having rheumatoid arthritis or a patient is having cancer, they are highly prone for this fungal disease. So this fungal disease usually involves your mouth, that is the palate, that is the hard palate. It will involve your nose. It will involve your orbit, that is the bone around your eye, and sometimes it invades your brain. So this is a very critical state, and we have to treat the patient very aggressively to get out of the disease. Or sometimes 70% of the cases need surgery to patient to be get cured.
Professor, we spoke about what is this virus, how does it spread, how does it get entered to the body, and what's the incubation period, what are the signs and symptoms, and one of the most important things that what we should discuss is, Professor, is the diagnosis. So in Sri Lanka, we try to do the RT-PCR antigen test, but I heard that in India, you all have gone little more than beyond by doing CT chest. So I would like to know what is the reason that you do CT chest and how you diagnose COVID positive patient.
Okay. In cases, what we see every day is not all the patients having, some patients having the disease, some patients having the symptoms, they don't correlate. Example, a patient comes with the classical symptoms of running nose, loss of taste, loss of smell, history of contact with his father who is a COVID patient, comes to us, we do a RT-PCR, sometimes it will be negative. That is, we call it as false negative, but still the patient shows symptoms. So what we do is we check the saturation level. Saturation level is the patient's oxygen level in his blood. If it is significantly low, we will suspect that patient is having a COVID-19 disease. So what we will do is, to confirm the disease, we will do a CT chest. If the CT chest, that is a CT chest in the sense, it is a imaging diagnostic method where your lungs will be screened and will be taken picture of it, and we will check for any clue for COVID-19 in those pictures. So those 90% of the time, your CT will be turned out to be positive, where the RT-PCR are negative. So we are, if the patient shows symptoms or any contact history, recent contact history with COVID-19 patients, if the RT-PCR is negative, we straight away do the CT chest, where 90% of our population is found to be positive, and we go ahead and do the treatment.
So you say that the chest CT is more accurate than the RT-PCR?
I would, from our treating point of view, yes, we would do that CT chest, even though we are not satisfied with the RT-PCR. But one factor prior to the CT chest is we will check the blood oxygen saturation. If the oxygen level is satisfactory, we may prolong the CT scan. If the oxygen saturation is less than our expected level, we would go ahead with the CT, irrespective of RT-PCR.
Professor, one of the things that what we have realized lately here in Sri Lanka, that some of the deaths are due to COVID pneumonia. So, you know, the signs and symptoms that you were discussing with us, beyond that, all of a sudden a person develops a COVID pneumonia and he end up just collapsing, and the end result is death. So what is the reason? They bypass all the signs and symptoms and goes for a COVID pneumonia.
Okay. As I said earlier, the virus enters your nose, then the throat, and finally you are into the lung. And once the virus enters the lung, because of your mechanism, it will try to produce inflammation. So when the lung signs shows certain signs of inflammation like cough with breathing difficulty, and we do a CT scan for that. If the CT scan is suggestive for COVID, we call it as pneumonia. Basically, there is the infection in the lung. That is basically, as a local term, we use it for pneumonia. So if there is the pneumonia, there is a the pneumonia, we will classify the pneumonia into certain mild, moderate, and severe CT severity scores. The moderate and severe, where the infection is high, the lung involvement because of the virus is high. So those cases won't have the proper gaseous exchange, means the lung won't function properly what it has to do. The gaseous exchange, that is, we breathe oxygen, we give out carbon dioxide. Once the COVID-19 hits inside the lung, if the disease is moderate to severe, your gas exchange is altered, means you won't take enough oxygen inside and you won't leave out enough carbon dioxide outside. There will be an impairment in your gas exchange. So the patient will have something called reduced oxygen level. We call it as hypoxia. Excuse me. So this is the time where the patient has severe breathlessness. So we have to address at this state. We are not addressing to this state. They will further develop something called respiratory failure, where the respiration doesn't take place what it has to take place. So because of that, there is a high chance the patient will go for something called cardiac arrest suddenly. That is why a patient collapses because of COVID-19. And one more factor I would like to add here is this COVID-19 is specifically known for something called thrombotic phenomenon, which is basically makes your blood to become more hot. So there is that point where your blood flow is smooth in your blood pipes. There is a point that one part of the blood pipe gets stopped because the blood has become hardened. So if the blood, whichever is passing through the hot blood pipes, suddenly there is a block because of the blood has become hardened, there is a chance that patient goes for collapse. So this is a death because of COVID, what we mostly see is because of the thrombotic event.
And Professor, one of the other things that I want to discuss with you today is basically the treatment.
Yes.
Now, here in Sri Lanka, we follow a different method, but I'm sure in India that you have a guideline that you follow. Mild, moderate, and severe patients you identify, and then you follow that guideline. If you can elaborate on that, Professor, that would be a great thing. I mean, not only for doctors here watching here in Sri Lanka, even around the world. Even it will be a great help for medical students who's watching this program today for their studies. So if you could elaborate on how you manage and treat COVID patients in India.
Okay. So when we suspect a patient with COVID, whoever has symptoms or history of any contact, so we will check the saturation and the temperature first. And even if the saturation is normal, your normal saturation has to be above 97% in room air. Room air in the sense without any aid of any other extra oxygen. So if it is 97%, it's above 97%, we consider it normal. So when the patient is suspected for COVID, we will check the saturation. If the saturation is less than 97, 96 or 95, we will do one more further evaluation is called exertional saturation. That is, we will ask the patient to walk for 50 steps or for 1 minute slowly, and we'll check for the saturation. After walking, if there is a further fall in saturation, we will have a high suspicious that he is having a fall in saturation because of COVID. Then we will do a CT chest. So following the CT chest, we will divide it into 3 categories. That is mild disease, moderate disease, and severe disease. Mild disease is only few symptoms with normal saturation and RT-PCR positive. So these mild disease cases, we will give oral medications and will advise them for home quarantine. Right now, the medications what we follow is usually the ivermectin and sometimes azithromycin, and most of the times we will manage with multivitamins like vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. So these people who doesn't show any much symptoms, we will classify under mild. Moderate disease are the patients who develop that hypoxia, who the saturation level are not maintaining, and their respiratory rate is above the normal. The normal respiratory rate is 14 to 16 times per minute. Respiratory rate in the sense how many times you breathe in a minute. That breathing pattern is more means the patient is struggling for more air. So he falls under moderate. For him, he needs admission. So on admission, we give oxygen and the same symptomatic treatments. The severe disease is where the patient saturation is really low. Let's take less than 90, and he's having continuous fever, even though taking Panadol or paracetamol. Patient is having other comorbid disease like heart disease or something. So these two categories, moderate and severe, we admit, and our treatment protocol slightly changes after that. We use something antiviral injections called remdesivir, where we give remdesivir based on 2-3 categories. So after admitting the patients from moderate to severe category, we do follow only 2 blood parameters, that is C-reactive protein we'll check and D-dimer. So C-reactive protein, we'll check it in blood. It shows how much is your inflammation is happening in the lung. So if it is markedly high, we will start injection remdesivir. That is on 5 days we will give, and along with the CRP, we will check D-dimer level. D-dimer level is also checked in blood. D-dimer level we mainly check because to rule out any thrombotic events. As I said earlier, thrombotic event means your blood becoming hard. So if the thrombotic event is significant, we may add some blood thinners like aspirin or heparin, something like that. So this is for the moderate disease. Severe, we follow the same protocol. Along with, we give extra oxygen support, something called non-invasive ventilation, where there is a high flow oxygen is given to make the patient to get out of the respiratory failure. And one more addition where we give remdesivir is the patient is, even though patient is normal, but the patient fever is not coming down, for 3-4 days, we will give remdesivir so that the patient gets soon better. One indication for remdesivir is the remdesivir injections work very well if you are giving within 10 days of infection. After 10 days of infection, the studies have shown that remdesivir effect is very less.
Professor, we have seen on social media, even on electronic media, that in India there are patients standing outside hospitals that they don't have hospital beds. And the other thing is that India required so much of oxygen.
Yes.
What is the reason? What is the current situation in India?
Oh. The main reason for the so much of shortage is, number one is population. India is densely populated, so the rate of infectivity spread is more. So the more the rate of infectivity spread, the more we need, the more the resources in need. So most of the patients, what we see is 70% of the patients fall in category 1. Okay, that is category A, who doesn't need oxygen, who we can manage in home quarantine. Category B and C needs oxygen. So let's take a hospital is having 100 beds, will have 70 beds with oxygen. So we are admitting 70 patients with oxygen. The oxygen need will go for 10 to 15 days. As like this, every day the infective rate is more. We cannot able to accommodate the newly diagnosed category of the resources. So we need more of oxygen, we need more of beds for the treating. It is not the patient is dying because we don't have the treatment. The patients are dying because we don't have the resources. As simple as that.
Yeah, Professor, now what we see and what we read on WHO, mostly what they say is give priority to vaccination.
Yes.
One of the reasons that most of the countries have succeeded, like Israel and even even now US is succeeding, is by vaccination. Now India have
Yes.
vaccinated around 9% of single dose and around
Yes.
2% both the doses. But
Yes.
whereas here in Sri Lanka, we have only vaccinated single dose around 4% and both the doses around 0.7%. We are at a very critical stage, Professor. Even some say that Sri Lanka might have to face something like India or probably something severe than India. So it alarms all of us and it concerns me as I am also living here in Sri Lanka with my family and my children. Professor, uh, what do you think now with this issue where the vaccination is very poor in terms of vaccination program which is ongoing here in Sri Lanka now? We have vaccinated Oxford AstraZeneca almost 900,000. Around 600,000 will probably not have the second dose on time. So, given this situation, some of the scientists and some of the doctors who represent the government say that they want to do something called uh, mix the vaccine. I don't know whether the WHO will allow that, but I would like to know in your perspective, how can we face this serious situation to get out of this upcoming threats that we are facing on COVID-19?
Okay. So regarding vaccination, vaccination is must, uh, especially 2 doses, which has a good impact on prevention of the disease. So in Indian scenario, those who have been vaccinated 2 doses also got the disease, but the disease severity is very, very less compared to the patients who have not been vaccinated. So the vaccinated population who got the disease were mostly of category A, whereas the non-vaccinated people mostly belong to category B and C. So vaccination doesn't prevent the disease as far as this disease is concerned, but it prevents the severity. So the mortality rate is very much reduced because of the vaccination. Now coming to your question, in Sri Lanka, we need to increase the vaccination drive, and because if there is a situation rise like in India, we don't have facilities and beds and hospitals like the big countries like USA or UK or even India. We don't have that much resources. So as I said, we need, it's not that we can't treat the disease, we need resources to treat the disease. So if the patient, I think approximately there are around 700 to 1,700 beds are available, ICU are available in Sri Lanka. If the cases are spiking, we will be running out of resources. So I would suggest to vaccinate mass vaccination, and I would advise to have a strict lockdown as much as possible. And regarding your cross vaccination, there is one study has come up that cross vaccination has improved the immunological level in most of the population. Let's take you have been vaccinated first with Covishield, and you have been vaccinated second with your Pfizer. Your immune status has gone up, but the studies are really, really less. But whatever the studies are available have shown positive outcomes. So it is better not to do anything to do something, right? So it's better to get vaccinated and prevent the spread rather than without being vaccinated.
Professor, I must do a bit of a correction to you. In fact, the statistics that I have in Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
we have around 700 ICU beds. Where University of Washington, they have done a survey. IHME have predicted that probably by June we will have per day 200 to 300 deaths in a day, which is a serious
Yes.
prediction, Professor. And to
Yes.
face it, we might need around 17,000 hospital beds and around 3,500 ICU beds. I mean, we are lacking behind. And what do you think on this? How could we face this, Professor?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. This is the same scenario we are facing in India right now. What the government is doing is they have started building a new oxygen plant, which is not, it doesn't take much time to build, so that they can keep the oxygen in stock. And the other countries are donating, giving some resources in terms of oxygen concentrators. So oxygen concentrators, it's a very easiest way. That is, it's a short term. It's like a suitcase where you have to plug it in your electricity board, and then the oxygen is delivered in electricity through electricity, which is the easiest one. Whereas the oxygen plant, it needs to deliver in a large amount, where it takes a time, really a long time. And because of the waiting time, there are so many patients are dying because there is no oxygen. So the better way is, I would like to advise is stocking up the oxygen, and you can increase the oxygen production as much as possible. And the third one is you can you can start keeping the oxygen concentrators like in reserve. So oxygen concentrator doesn't need any hospital monitoring or anything big. So the patient can, whoever is having that respiratory failure in a moderate disease, can use that oxygen concentrator at home. And the need of ICU and the ventilators is reduced by using oxygen concentrators. And by increasing the oxygen plant production, we can be able to supply the in-demand people. And to cut costs more than this, I would sincerely advise to vaccinate as early as possible and have a mass vaccination as much as possible. Always prevention is better than cure.
Most certainly, Professor. And the other thing that what we are facing is oxygen transportation. Canister cylinders, bowsers are required. Anyways, Professor, in Sri Lanka that we have identified 5 variant of virus, starting from UK, Europe, South Africa, Sri Lanka, India. B1411 is the Sri Lankan variant, which has reduced tremendously because the UK variant has taken up. Anyways, Professor, it was a great opportunity for me to have this great conversation with you, and we would like to keep in touch with you and have a few other programs with you, because I think it will be a educational program and a health program at the same time. Thank you so much, Professor, for your time, and be safe and keep in touch. God bless you.
Yeah. Thank you, Honorable Dr. Kavinda Jayavendra, for your time and for this meeting. And I hope this will at least help some people to realize what exactly is happening. And this is what we are faced is, initially we were thinking this is happening in the other country. The time when we realized it's happening in the other country, it was in our country. Then we were thinking it is in the other state. By the time we started in other state, it was in our state. Then in our state, we were thinking it is in other family. Now it is coming in our family. So the disease is faster than you think. So kindly vaccinate yourself, protect yourself, be safe, be at home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Hope to see you soon in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, same here. Thank you, Karan.
God bless.
You.